am Professor Namita Rajput, Professor in Department of Commerce, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. In the ongoing series of corporate governance, today we will be talking more on models of corporate governance. The corporate governance is a fundamental pillar of effective organizational management, encompassing the structure, process and the practices by which a company is directed and controlled. Now, across the global business landscape, there are various models of corporate governance which have emerged with the time, reflecting the diverse cultural, regulatory and institutional context in which the companies operate. So, in these models, they shape the relationships between the key stakeholders, they define the decision-making process and establish the mechanism for accountability, transparency within the organization. One prominent model of the corporate governance is the Anglo-American model, commonly observed in the countries like US and UK. And this model places a strong emphasis on the shareholder primacy with the primary goal of maximizing the shareholders' wealth. The board of directors in this model, they typically consist of a majority of independent directors who observe and oversee the management and make the strategic decisions, often guided by the principles of transparency and the shareholder rights. In contrast, the continental European model, prevalent in the countries like Germany and France, features a two-tiered board structure. And this model separates the management and oversight the functions into two distinct boards. One is the management board, which is responsible for the day-to-day operations, and the supervisory board is the second one, which is tasked with overseeing the management board's activities. So this dual board structure aims to ensure a balance of power and facilitate a long-term strategic planning. The Asian model of corporate governance, witnessed in the countries like Japan and South Korea, it emphasizes the long-term relationship and a consensus decision-making. Yes, we are talking about now the third model, that is the Asian model. Now, in this, the companies in these regions, they often engage in the cross-shareholdings with the other firms and the banks and the board of directors. They play a significant role in maintaining these interconnected relationships. Additionally, a strong focus on the corporate governance and the social responsibility and sustainability is characterized by the Asian governance model. Now comes the Nordic model. The Nordic model, prevalent in the countries like Sweden and Norway, it prioritizes a balanced approach that considers the interest of the shareholders, employees and the other stakeholders. The employee representation on the board is common in this model, fostering a collaboration and inclusivity in the decision-making process. Furthermore, the Nordic companies often embrace the sustainability practices and the social responsibility initiatives as integral components of their governance framework. Now, the family-owned business presents a unique governance model, which is the next model, where the family members often hold a key position within the company. The decision-making in these organizations may be influenced by the family dynamics and the long-term family goals, highlighting the importance of balancing the family interest with the broader objectives of the business. Moreover, in certain regions, the state-owned enterprises operate under a governance model influenced by the government ownership or the significant state involvement. The corporate governance in these entities is often shaped by the political considerations, the government policies, and the need to balance the commercial objectives with the broader societal objectives. Now, these models of corporate governance, what we are discussing, they offer a valuable insight into how the companies are structured and governed. And it is essential to recognize that the organizations may adopt a blend of elements from the different models based on their specific needs and the operating environments. By understanding and implementing the effective corporate governance practices, the companies can enhance the transparency, accountability, and the trust among the shareholders and the stakeholders, ultimately fostering the long-term sustainability and the success in today's dynamic business landscape. Now, the Anglo-Saxon model, also known as the American model, is a system of corporate governance prevalent in the countries like USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and to some extent India. And it's a well developed stock market. It has a shareholder primacy, and the emphasis is on the financial performance. The companies following the Anglo-Saxon model, they prioritize the financial performance and the stakeholder value maximization as the key objective. So, this focus on profitability and returns to the shareholder is a hallmark of this governance system. There is a board structure in the Anglo-Saxon model typically consists of the combination of executive and independent directors who are responsible for overseeing the company's management and strategic decisions. Now, the regulatory framework in the countries following this model is often characterized by a principle-based approach that focuses on transparency, disclosure, accountability to the shareholders. So, overall this model is known as a market-oriented approach, focuses on the shareholder supremacy. It is one of the prominent models of the corporate governance in the Western business world. It has strong incentives for the management, aligning the interest of the management with those of the shareholders, with the enhanced accountability, transparency, and it has a shareholder supremacy and monitor and evaluate the company's performance and moat for the matter of executive compensation, corporate structure, mergers and acquisition, and influencing the company's strategic direction. It has the access to the financial information. The shareholder has an access to the financial information, enabling them to make the informed decisions about their investments. The legal protection for the shareholders. The shareholders have a right to sue the company if they feel their rights have been violated, providing the legal protection and the recourse in case of the misconduct and the violations. Now, we are talking about the application. The application is actually it is a shareholder-centric model and which prioritizes the supremacy and the prime focus on the governance issues which are giving mileage to the shareholders. And this approach ensures that the governance structures are designed to maximize the shareholder value and align with the management interest. Now, it has independent shareholders. In this model, any independent shareholder invest in the companies for financial gain and have a minimal involvement beyond their investments. The institutional investors like banks and mutual fund, they also play a very important role investing for the financial returns and having a flexibility to sell the shares based on the market conditions. The structure of the board in this model is having an accountability to shareholder with the minimum bureaucracy. The executive compensation is tied with the performance, emphasizing the short-term results to measure the success. The shareholder in the companies in this model are regularly engaged by the board, providing an opportunity to voice their approval and disapproval on certain issues and receive through reporting on the company's performance. So, this active engagement ensures the transparency and accountability in this particular type of structure. And of course, this company experiences a higher growth rate due to a streamlined relationship between the shareholders, board and the management. And this approach actually have fewer checks and balances, giving the leaders more freedom to drive the growth initiatives. And the application of this model is characterized by the shareholder-centric nature and emphasis on transparency and accountability, with the active shareholder engagement focuses on driving growth through efficient decision-making process, aligning with the shareholders' interest. Now comes the German model. The German model of the corporate governance, also known as a dual board or the two-tiered board, is a distinct in its structure and approach compared to the more widely known as Anglo-American model. It has a two-tiered board in terms of one is a management board and the other is a supervisory board. Management board is responsible for day-to-day activities, whereas the supervisory board is for the strategic decision making. And the supervisory board is responsible for overseeing and monitoring the management board's activities and is made up of non-executive directors and has no involvement in the daily business operation. Then it is a co-determination is a next feature of the German model. A distinctive feature of the German model is the system of co-determination where the employees have a right to participate in the governance of the companies. Depending on the size of the company, up to half of the supervisory board may be composed of the employee representatives, including the union representatives. So, this model and this system is intended to ensure that the interest of the shareholders are taken into account in the company's decisions making process. Then we have a concentrated ownership. The German companies often have a concentrated ownership with the significant stakes held by the families, the state, banks and other large investors. So this can lead to a situation where the small number of shareholders, they have a significant influence on the corporate decisions. Then is the role of banks. The banks play a very substantial role in the German corporate governance model, and they are often the large shareholders and have a representation on the supervisory board. Banks can also exercise a proxy vote on behalf of the small investors at a general meeting, giving them some additional influence. The stakeholder orientation. The German model places a strong emphasis on the interest of all the stakeholders, including the stakeholders, employees, customers, suppliers, and the broader community. The goal is to create a balance between these interests and to ensure a long-term stability and the success of the company. Next we have is a regulatory framework. The corporate governance in the Germany is regulated by a combination of a statutory law and the voluntary codes. The German corporate governance provides a recommendation and suggestions for good and responsible corporate governance, although adherence to the code is not legally mandatory. Next feature of the German model is focus on the long-term success. The German corporate governance practices typically favor the long-term strategic planning over the short-term financial gains. The involvement of the various stakeholders in the decision-making process is through a contribute to a more sustainable approach to managing the company. The German model of the corporate governance has been both praised and criticized and fosters a more socially responsible, stable capitalism by taking into account the interest of a broader stakeholders. However, the critiques say that the co-determination system can lead to a conflict of interest and slow down the decision-making process. So, the German model of corporate governance presents a unique set of advantages and the disadvantages, like it has a very clear allocation of responsibilities, enhanced role of executive director liability, flexible supervisory panel, and modern and transparent system. That is, adopting a German model could potentially move the corporate governance towards a more modern and transparent system of corporate management, aligning with the international best practices. And next is your efficient management for the private equity. The features of the German model make it viable option for the private equity industry, enabling efficient management of the portfolio companies and a closer monitoring of the managers. There are some disadvantages relating to the German model, like a fragmented regulation. The body of regulating the German model is fragmented, poorly drafted, and lacks a strong case laws support, requiring a significant time and effort from a professional advisor and clients to ensure the compliance and fill the regulatory gaps. Now, the German model emphasizes on the insider trading, that is, a lack of effective monitoring is one of the drawbacks of the German model. The German model emphasizes on insider control and limited external market control mechanisms. It may lead to a managerial slack, as lack of the efficient monitoring by outsiders could impact the corporate governance effectiveness. The next is your discouragement of the takeovers. The German model discouragement of the hostile takeovers through the voting rights limitations and the employee representatives on the supervisory board may hinder the market competitiveness and limit the managerial accountability. So basically, now we are moving on to the Japanese model. The Japanese model of the corporate governance is distinguished by several unique features that distinguish and differentiate it from the other models, that is American and European. It has a cross shareholding. The Japanese corporations often engage in cross shareholdings where the companies hold the stakes in each other. This practice strengthens the business alliance and reduces the risk of hostile takeovers, fostering a long-term relationship over the short-term gains. Then is the main bank system. In this system, one bank has a significant relationship with the company, providing not just the financing but also the financial advice and the crisis management. So this main bank acts as a monitor and sometimes intervenes in the company's management to ensure the stability and the long-term growth. Next is your keiretsu. This refers to a group of enterprises with interlocking business relationship with a shareholder. So this can be horizontal, linking the companies from the various industries, or vertical, linking manufacturers with the suppliers and the distributors. So this system promotes the loyalty, cooperation and stability within the group. There's a lifetime employment. That is, although becoming a less prevalent today, the practice of lifetime employment has been a key feature of the Japanese model. The employees are hired straight out to a school and expected to stay the same until their retirement. This fosters the loyalty and the collective mindset with a focus on training and developing the employees for a long term. Next is your seniority-based wage promotion system. Traditionally, wages and promotion in Japanese companies, they have been on the seniority rather than performance. This system supports a lifetime employment model, ensuring a job security but potentially limiting the individual initiative and innovation. Next feature of the Japanese model is consensus-based decision making. It emphasizes on consensus and collective decision making, often involving extensive consultation and the meetings. This particular approach seeks to ensure harmony and reduce the conflict within the organization, though it can sometimes lead to a slower decision making process. Then it has a limited role of the outside directors. Historically, the Japanese boards have a fewer outside directors compared to the other counterparts in US, etc. This is a changing gradually with the recent governance reforms aimed at enhancing the transparency and accountability. But the influence of the internal management remains very, very strong. Next is your government-based relations. The Japanese government has historically played a very significant role in the economy, influencing a direct involvement in certain industries and indirect influence through regulation and the policy. So this close relationship between the government and the business has shaped the corporate governance practices. The Corporate Governance Code, introduced in 2015 and revised since, the Japanese Corporate Governance Code aims to improve the transparency, enhance the board functions and boost the shareholder rights. This code encourages the companies to adopt the best practices in the governance through compliance is not mandatory. So these features create a corporate governance environment in Japan that prioritize stability, long-term relations and harmony, contrasting with more market-driven and shareholder-focused models seen in the US and Europe. However, the globalization and the domestic challenges are driving gradually changes in the Japanese corporate governance, including a greater emphasis on the shareholder value, more outside directed, and shift away from the lifetime employment and seniority-based system. Now, this model presents a distinct set of advantages like the stable profitability and long-term sustainability, stronger stakeholder involvement, high capital mobility and sustainable prospects, enabling the creation of a long-term sustainable prospects for both individual and the organization. It has a unique governance mechanism, ensuring a structured approach to the governance, and it has certain disadvantages also like limited foreign investments, weak connection between the market value and the material incentives, market perception and integrated challenges, slow monitoring and equal treatment issues. The Japanese corporate governance model, the concentrating incentives towards the company's interest, may suffer from slow monitoring process and waste due to equal treatment practices, leading to inefficiencies in the governance mechanism. These advantages and disadvantages provide a comprehensive overview of these characteristics, and the application is that it is a shareholder focused model, and there is a board structure enhancement in this regard, and there is a shareholder involvement also and engagement also. So, leading to enhanced corporate engagement and addresses the issues like low rate of equity, lagging business restructuring and overly conservative management. So, despite some progress in increasing returns to the shareholder through dividend and the shareholder repurchases. So, there is a need to further strengthen the shareholder primacy and to drive the technological innovation, etc. Now, adaptation to the global trends. The Japanese model is transforming to adapt the global trends, moving away from the traditional focus, and it considers a wide range of shareholder impacted by the corporate activities. So, basically, we can say that the overall Japanese model is an excellent model of the corporate governance with the focus redefining the purpose, engaging and enhancing the board structure and fostering the shareholder engagement. So it is actually redefining the entire thing, and there is a paradigm shift with a broader view of the stakeholders, including the global citizenship and the natural environment and the future generations. So basically, while appointing the independent directors in this Japanese model, it is very crucial. It is not a standalone solution. The complementary measures like reorganization of the employment systems, enacting the policy reforms are very necessary to drive the dynamics and innovation with the Japanese companies. And there is a shareholder engagement also, and there is a global trend adoption also, as has already been discussed. And now we talk about the Indian model. The Indian model of the corporate governance has evolved significantly over the years. It has shaped a mix of the legacy frameworks, cultural influences, and the market dynamics. So there are regulatory frameworks. The cornerstone of the corporate governance in India is its comprehensive regulatory framework, which includes the Companies Act 2013 and the Security Exchange Board of India guidelines. So these regulations and guidelines, they cover a wide array of the governance issues like the board composition, independent directors, audit committees, corporate structure, CSR, and disclosure requirements. Next is your SEBI. SEBI is a primary regulatory authority for the corporate governance practices in India. It enforces the regulations and guidelines for the listed companies to ensure transparency, fairness, and accountability. Next is your Companies Act 2013. This act is a comprehensive legal framework that governs the incorporation, regulation, and dissolution of the companies in India. It includes the provisions of board composition, board meetings, director duties, audit committees, and the corporate social responsibility. There is a listing obligation and a disclosure regulatory LODR. So the SEBI LODR regulations mandate the legal companies to adhere to the stringent disclosure and the governance standards, aiming to enhance the transparency and protect the investor interest. There is a board composition and independence. The Indian model emphasizes a balanced composition of executive and non-executive directors, and this balance is leading to impartiality, which is really good. And one of the distinctive features of the Indian model is a mandatory spending on the CSR, which is mandated by the Companies Act 2013. There are audit committees in place which helps in the reporting practices, that how, what, when and where the coverage has to be there. There is a risk management also. The companies are required to have a mechanism for identifying and mitigating the risk. There is a promoter influence. In many of the Indian companies, especially the family-owned business, the promoters, the founders, or the controlling shareholders play a very significant role. So there is a family ownership and control. A significant portion of the Indian companies, including many large corporations, are family owned or the controlled. So this has the implications for the corporate governance, as decision making often centers around controlling the family, leading to a blend of the professional management with the family oversight. So this has a long-term stability and commitment. There is a special role which is played by independent director to ensure that there is, the companies are not entirely controlled by the major shareholders. Independent directors are expected to be very objective in their approach, protecting the interest of the minority shareholders. And the CSR spending is also one of the top feature of the Indian corporate model. The companies are required to spend a minimum amount of their profits on the CSR initiatives, and there is a focus on the shareholder rights, which leads to a better transparency, etc. The audit committees also play a vital role in the financial reporting practices. The promoter influence in India, they have a control over the companies typically through the shareholdings. So there is a stakeholder engagement. The Indian model recognizes the importance of the various stakeholders, including the employee, customer, suppliers, and the community. So there is a growing emphasis on the stakeholder engagement and sustainability reporting practices, inclusive approach to the corporate governance. There is a legal and judicial activism also as far as the Indian model is concerned, and despite this there are few challenges in the Indian model which leads to a stronger influence. And this model aims to foster a governance culture that only enhances the corporate performance and the competitiveness, but also contributes to the sustainable economic growth and the social activities. So there is a enhanced investor confidence, shareholder protection, long-term interest, regulatory compliance, And there are some implementation challenges, there are market influence challenges, and of course, the limited small business adoption is there, which leads to a robust corporate governance practices due to the resources crunch. And as far as the application of this is concerned, there are shareholder rights, and the regulatory agencies, stock market, oversee the company's policy and the action to ensure the compliance with the guidelines. There's a legal framework which needs to be followed completely. There are some regulatory oversights by SEBI which are also pivotal to guide the company. There is a stakeholder activism. So we can say at the end, this approach aims to ensure that the interest of all stakeholders are considered, promoting accountability, transparency, and the long-term sustainability. Thank you so much.